Hey Julia, so I was going to walk you through how to do this, but it's easier if I just take a video and send it to you. So for your math question, the answer is yes. You're going to want to use the calculated formula. Here's how it works. And you can do a variety of things. I'm going to do your first one, which is about averages. So if you haven't done this before, I'll walk you through it. It's pretty easy. Go in your course and down in course tools, go down to test surveys and pools underneath the control panel. And then I'm just going to make a sample test. So I'm going to click on tests and I'm going to hit build test. You can call this whatever you want, but I'm going to just call this calculated formula examples. I'll leave this up blank for now and hit submit. And then once you build the test, you'll be put in the canvas where you can start adding questions. So the question you're going to want to use is the calculated formula. It's the first question type underneath create questions, the create question drop down. So when you hit calculated formula, it's a little weird at first, but it's actually pretty powerful. The way it works is you in the question text, you invent as many variables as you need, and those get surrounded by brackets, like this example here in the help. So when I'm looking at your question here, it says, so you've got, you're asking randomly generates a number or a set of numbers, and that you want that the answer to be the mean of the numbers. So in this example, let's do three numbers. So what I want to do is present each student with three numbers. They're each going to get a different number one, a different number two, a different number three, and then I'm going to tell them, generate the mean, calculate the mean of these three numbers. And so you can have it so that each student gets a different number, but obviously Blackboard's figuring the answer out because it's always doing it by a formula, thus the calculated formula. So here's how it works. Under the question text, this is what the students will see, and I'll say calculate the mean of the following, and I can even say three numbers because I know it's going to be three. And so here's where the variables go. So because it's three, I'm going to use X, Y, and Z, but they go in brackets, and I'm going to separate them by commas. The student will not see the brackets. They won't see the X, the Y, or the Z, but they will see the number and the space and the comma. So it's going to look like this. It'll do X, and then I'll do Y, and then I'll do Z. And so calculate the mean of the following three numbers. That's the entire question as the student will see it. Now down here in the answer formula, you tell Blackboard essentially how you want it to solve the problem. The confusing part is you wonder, well, what is X, what is Y, what is Z? You actually get to define that on the next page. So don't worry about that right now, because you can define if they're going to be huge numbers, small numbers, if they're going to have decimal points, that's later on. Down in answer formula, a pretty easy answer formula, and I'm sure you've seen one of these math editors before. So I'm going to just do it. I might do it overly complicated, but this math editor sometimes is a little stupid when it comes to math, so I'm overly specific. So what I'll do is I'll actually use the kind of fraction tool, and then I'll also use the parentheses tool just so I know it won't mess up. But I'll do X, and then I'll do Y, and then I'll add Z, and then because we always know it's going to be three numbers, I put the three, and that's essentially the formula. So regardless of the numbers in play, that's how the mean would be calculated, and then we go on. And you can also, by the way, deal with, I won't go through these now, but you can decide, like, do you an answer range? Probably not in this case, a pretty clear-cut answer, but if you have questions where, it's to several decimal points, or there's a variability in the calculation, you could allow a certain range, so that, like, I could say plus or minus 2, and if the answer was 100, but they put 101, they'd still get it right, but then there's going to be partial credit, and you can decide whether or not you want to work with those. I'm going to make it, by making it 0, the answer is the answer. They have to get it perfectly correct. So I'll move on. I'm going to hit next. And then on this next page, this is where you define how you want these to behave. So again, I'm going to keep this simple, but you could decide to have really long, complex numbers. I can decide I want it to be 100.694216, and I pick 6 decimal places. I'll keep these basic integers. And then you can also decide the number size. So, for example, if I wanted all of these to be, 3-digit numbers or 2-digit numbers, you can decide. So maybe I'll do something like, I can say the minimum value is 100, the maximum value is 999. Maybe I'll do that again for the second variable. And again, these are all up to you. And then maybe I'll throw in a zinger, and I'll make my students say, I'm going to say this number is going to be, let's say it's going to be at least 1,000, but I don't want to make it higher than any other 4-digit number, so I'll say 9999. And then this is where you want to be sure. So for number sets, when we talk about cheating, oh, sorry, calculate answers to the nearest decimal point. This is when Blackboard runs the calculation you built on the previous page, the x plus y plus z over 3. It's how far do you want it to carry out the calculation. Again, if you're using integers, it's easy. If you're not, this is something you're going to have to start playing with, because you could end up with, this especially is complicated if you're going to end up with situations where like especially with any problem that has division in it, you could end up with some kind of repeating number or 0.33333. You're going to want to truncate it and decide how far out they want to carry it. That's kind of your choice to make. But the calculate answers and the decimal places here, these are definitely tied together, because how complicated you make the variable numbers is going to decide how complicated the answer is going to be that Blackboard figures out for you. Then, of course, is going to impact on how specific you want your student to be when they report the answer. So those are, and you can play with it yourself, but I'm leaving this simple for this example. The answer sets should be at least as many students as you have in your class, because if you have 30 students and you only generate 10 answer sets, some of those numbers are going to repeat. To be safe, you can even go haywire and make sure and do a lot of answer sets. One of the reasons I do that is because in the case where I've given like practice tests and I allow that question to be reused, and the nice thing about these questions is they can be reused over and over and over again, because if you generate enough answer sets, no one ever sees the same answer again. They can take the same quote unquote question multiple times, but it's never the same question. Nobody gets the same question. So you're not going crazy, but if I have a class of 20 students, I might do 100 answer sets. And that way, if I'm only giving the test once, no one's going to see the same numbers, but they're all going to see the question. It's going to say, calculate the mean, and then it's going to say these numbers, and it's going to say number, comma, number, comma, number, and they're all going to get different numbers for those variables. So I'm going to say 100, and then this really only matters, like you can decide if you want them to be exponential. I'm just, again, leaving this basic because these are all integers anyway, and the numbers are never going to be all that big. So I'll hit calculate. And if you hit calculate, you don't have to do anything on the screen, but this just shows you what the numbers are going to be. It's cool to see. So I did 100, and you can see here's all 100 are on there. You don't have to do anything at all with this. Now, for whatever reason you wanted to like override and add in your own numbers, you could. But the whole point is to let Blackboard do the work for you, and here it is. You can also recalculate if you don't like these choices, but I'm just gonna, these are fine, or you can remove a couple that look weird, but these are all within the ranges that I specified. All of these are valid. It's no problem. So then I'm gonna hit submit. And the question is built. So that's what the question will actually look like in Blackboard. Now if you want to see like, well, how does it behave? There's a couple ways that you can do this. You can preview a question, but a lot of times, and you may have dealt with this before, the preview tool isn't exactly, it doesn't give you that full student experience. So I'm going to show you how you can truly preview it using the actual preview mode in Blackboard. It lets you behave as if a real student. I don't normally get paranoid about previewing the stuff I make in Blackboard, except for questions like this. I want to be sure it actually works. So let's take a look at it. So what I'm going to do is, and if I don't want my students to, mess around with it or whatever else, you can actually deploy this fake test in a hidden area of your course. So you can mess around with it and you can get to it and see it, and it'll still work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on my course menu, I'm going to make a new, and this is only if you really want to, or you can just put it somewhere, preview it, and then kind of turn it off. That's all up to you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new content area, and I'm going to call this testing, but I'm not going to make it available to users. So I'll leave that checkmark off and hit submit. So it'll add to my menu, but see, it's got the little slash through it, so it's not going to be seen. So now, and I've got this test. This test is done. It's a test with one question, but it's done. So I'm going to go into this content area called testing. It's invisible to students right now. And I'm going to go to the, actually, wait, hold on. Actually, I was just realizing in order to do a test, it's got to be available. So I am going to have to make this available. I'll leave it available for a little while. Actually, I don't make it available right before I take the test. So let's, I'm going to go into assessments. I'm going to go to test. And that new test that I added should be in there. And there it is, my calculated formula example. I'll hit submit. And then I don't have to configure all the test options if I don't want to, although if you want to play with it, you can. But you have to at least make it available. So down here under test availability, I've got to make the test available. And for this case, I am going to allow multiple attempts with unlimited because I'm testing it. I want to take it a couple times and make sure it's generating different numbers each time. And that's really the only thing you have to turn on to make the test work. The rest of this, because this is just an example, I'm not going to bother with all these. I'll hit submit and the test will be available. Now, normally I would tell folks, okay, go ahead and toggle into the preview mode and go take your test. But the problem is if you toggle into the preview mode, it'll make this area unavailable and students can't see it. So while you're working on this, the only real way to do a true preview, unless you have a course that no students are in, is you need to make this testing available, testing area that you made available, or better, any content area that you've got a test in, if you want to preview it, you got to make that area available. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it in the preview mode. So just for a little bit, I'm going to go here. I'm going to hit show link. That is now available. And then this is the fun little tool up here. You're going to hit this enter student preview tool. It's kind of like a little circle with the arrows around it. When you click that, it'll actually take you in as an instructor to a preview mode of your own course. Exactly. All right, once you're in preview mode, you're gonna, let me move this little bar out of the way. There we go. Once you're in preview mode, what you're gonna wanna do is then go take your test. So I'm gonna go into testing. That was my little sample content area. I'm gonna hit my new test. I'm gonna hit begin, and then I'm gonna get presented with my question. And notice it's giving my own answers. So let me go ahead and calculate out these answers. And let's see, so we've got 498, we've got 670, and we've got 3110. And I would probably redo the way I displayed this question now that I'm seeing with the comma, the way that it is. I'd probably stack them so that the commas weren't there, just to like X, Y, Z on top of each other, or just not put commas in. But I didn't realize it would always put a comma with a 4-digit number. But, you know, or I can just not enter my own commas just to make it clear that those are 3 numbers. But anyway, so my answer is 1426. So I should put that in. I will save and submit. I'll hit OK. And assuming I did it right, let me see if it actually did it right. I got my 10 out of 10 points. So, and it figured it out. Now, because I allowed multiple attempts, you can see it's going to give me different numbers if I went to take it again. So I hit calculate formula again, I hit begin, and this time it's going to be, I'm going to start a new submission, and it's going to be a completely different set of numbers. And because there was 100 numbers that you generated. So that's one way to do one kind of question. You asked about, you know, an average question. So the other one that you would mention here, which is about, you know, 1 minus 2 over 3, it's just a variant of the same question. So, you know, the way I built the question is I used 3 variables, and that you just use 2. You'd use, you know, an x plus a y, and then you just divide it by 3 instead of an x plus y plus z divided by 3. But now that I'm looking at it, I would probably go back and just change. I exit the student preview, and just so that no students would see this, I'm going to go and make this area unavailable again. I'll hide it so no one will come across my fake little test while I work on it. But then I would probably go back into test surveys and pools, go back into my test, and if I really wanted to make it good, I would edit this test, and then I would go edit that one question here. And the formula is fine. It's just the way it displays to students. This looks a little confusing. So I think I probably do it something like, and if you hit enter, it'll do like a big line down. If you do shift enter, it'll just do a very small break. And I would probably do it like that so that the numbers would be stacked on top of each other and wouldn't be confusing to the student. Everything else would stay the same. And you can see, so you've got a full math editor here. You can make lots of questions, but it's that calculated formula question is what you want to use. And then after this, I can just, you know, walk through. It's going to still, you know, it'll still do everything. And that's my question. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you get stuck.